Welcome, game dev adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today, we're kicking off Pride Month with Layla Pigott and talking about the challenges and rewards of being trans and queer in the game industry.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
Come one, come all, welcome to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. In our live magical podcast, we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. As always, I'm your host here, Willem Delventhal, and joining me today is Layla Pigott. Layla is a game designer, filmmaker, and the founder of Lookout Drive Games, and I'm so excited to be hanging out with you here today, Layla. How are you doing? What are you having for lunch today?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm having pizza for lunch today because I'm a New Yorker and that's my favorite food. And my birthday's tomorrow, so I'm treating myself.
Hey, congratulations. Do you mind telling us how old you are turning, Layla?
32 years young.
Hey, my own age. I feel like 32 is like simultaneously good and bad. I hit 31 and I got kind of depressed because it was like 30 was exciting. I was like, yeah, I did it. I got to 30. And then 31 was just the rest of my life. And then 32 kind of felt like maybe I'm starting to figure it out. How do you feel?
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, so I guess this will be a good transition into my origin, I guess. But I came out as trans when I was 29, and that was March of 2023. So
okay.
Honestly, I feel like my life, in a way, kind of started over at that point, and then I turned 30 about 3 months later. So I feel like, in a good way, I feel like my 30s has kind of been like the start of a new life for me. So it's like,
wow,
yeah,
that's kind of wonderful, honestly. Congratulations on that, and congratulations on making it to 30. We did it together.
We did it.
Yeah. All right. Well, as you started to allude to here, what we always begin with on this podcast is the origin story. So, Layla, I'd love to hear about your career, where you are today, and how you got there.
Sure. So I've loved games, not just video games, but board games, card games, tabletop games, my whole life. They've pretty much been like 1 and 2, like in terms of like film and TV and games, have been like my first and second loves. I grew up playing like on the Game Boy Color a lot and the N64, GameCube. I played a lot of story-driven games, point-and-click adventure games. When I was a kid, I played a lot of the Humongous Entertainment games by Ron Gilbert.
Which ones were those?
Putt Putt Travels Through Time, like all those games, Spy Fox,
yes,
Freddy Fish, Pajama Sam.
Oh, Freddy Fish.
Yeah, all those games. If you're a 90s kid, you know what I'm talking about.
One of our podcast guests at one point, Layla, was George the Fat Man Sanger, who did the audio for those games. And it was
oh my god.
I was more starstruck then than when I was talking to Will Shen, the guy who wrote "Oh, You're Finally Awake" in Skyrim.
I need it. Wow, the fact that I am a guest on this podcast with those incredible people being previous guests means a lot, because I am not nearly as accomplished as either of those two. But I will say, those Humongous Entertainment games were really fun. I will say, though, probably the game that kind of defined my taste in games, I think, going forward was, I'm not going to say it's an obscure game, but it's a game that I think is overlooked. It's Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords. It's the sequel to the original Knights of the Old Republic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed the first Knights of the Old Republic a lot. But I think that second game, and I was 11, 12 years old when I played it on the original Xbox. I think that game was so, like, it hit me at the perfect moment in my life where the writing, the storytelling, the themes that were being discussed, the subject matter, a lot of which was honestly pretty dark for a Star Wars property, especially at the time when the prequels were coming out and things like that.
Hmm.
And it was just so different from any other game I'd played, especially like an RPG. And yeah, that kind of really, I think, in a way, informed my taste in like what type of video games I really love, what type of storytelling in games I really love. And then from there on, I really started playing like a ton of RPGs, like for console and then later PC. So the Mass Effect games, the original Mass Effect trilogy,
Hmm.
Mass Effect 2 especially, one of my favorite games of all time. Dragon Age, the Dragon Age games. I've enjoyed all of them, including Veilguard, which I'm going to talk about a little bit when I talk about being queer and trans in the game industry as well. Um, and um, The Witcher, obviously, Fallout, obviously,
Hmm.
um, incredible games.
A lot of those
Cyberpunk,
highly reactive, highly, the universe is yours, the world changes, branching endings. A lot of that good stuff
yeah,
sounds like.
exactly. But then I also like I think once I got to college, I also really discovered my love for like indie games, smaller, independently made games that are really story driven. You know, titles like Gone Home, What Remains of Edith Finch, um, Papers, Please. I
Mm.
mean, those games are huge, huge influences. In fact, I almost um, optioned the rights to, write a script for a Papers, Please movie when I was in
Whew.
college. Um, Lucas Pope and I had maybe one or two email conversation before he stopped talking to me and ended up giving the rights to this other filmmakers who made a short film that ended up on Steam. So I'm happy for them they were able to make that. But yeah, I've kind of had a love for games and filmmaking kind of equally. And then I went to NYU for film school, but I also took game center classes there, and I met a lot of great indie game devs, a couple of which um, have gone on to have really wonderful careers. I mean, Nina Freeman, I'm friends with, and she is an incredible game developer. I don't know if
Mm.
you've ever played any of her work, but it's really cool.
What are some of their
Um,
games? Some of her games?
Nina is someone that used to work at. It's funny. She used to work at the studio that made Gone Home. She
Mm.
used to work at Fulbright. Um,
Okay.
so she worked on Tacoma, um, and but I just remember in college, playing. I don't know if this was her first game, but it was the first game that got a lot of attention about. It's called How Do You Do It, and it was basically this short game where you play as a young girl who's like attempting to understand how like sex works by positioning different dolls. And it's a
Mm.
really interesting concept for a game that I really,
Wow.
really thought was really cool and
Mm.
unique. And I think most recently she worked on, I think she was the lead writer for Don't Nod's latest game, Lost Records, Bloom and Rage.
Mm.
Um, which I unfortunately haven't had the time to check out, but I'm absolutely going to because I think both parts just released. So
Mm.
yeah, she's a really cool game designer. Um, and yeah, I think for me, like honestly, what was so wonderful about taking those game center classes was I got exposed to um, game design for the first time and thinking about games in a way that made me really want to start trying to make my own games. So I did a couple of game jams after college, didn't really do anything seriously. And then after that, I think it wasn't really until the pandemic happened that I was by myself making games. And not only was I thinking about making games, I was also kind of parallel thinking about my gender as well. And I was thinking about, you know, uh, wanting to work on creative projects that I actually had some sense of creative control over because I had worked as an assistant editor for about 5 years at this point in the film industry after college. And while I was having great experiences, I think the problem was I didn't never really had creative control over anything, right? So I was very much just always a team player, and I kind of wanted to be a director, a leader. Um, and so honestly, you know, 2020 was when I kind of first started coming up with the idea for Bitter Silver, which is the game that I'm working on now. But I wouldn't really start working on it until 2021 when I took a games writing class. Um, and that really opened up my eyes to the possibilities of being a writer for games, being a game designer, working with a team of people. I started doing game jams, like for visual novels. Um, and yeah, and this was 2021, and then 2022 was when I put out, I guess, Lookout Drive's first Lookout Drive Games is, excuse me, first game, Portrait of a Texas Family. Um, and then that kind of blew up a little bit a few months after it came out, and yeah, it was very surprising, but very happy to see more people, you know, be able to play that game and check that game out, and now we're working on, our next game, uh, the team, which is about 7 to 8 people, including myself, which is called Bitter Silver. And that game is basically a visual novel love letter to the anime Cowboy Bebop. And yeah, we did a Kickstarter last year. We raised a little bit under 14K. So now, we're in production on the game currently, and the goal is to have it out by, the first quarter of 2026. But yeah, that's my origin story. Yeah, I kind of came at it from the film industry side and transitioning, but I still work in the film industry. I still love film and TV, but I also really do love games a lot.
I love. There's a lot of stuff about your origin story that feels close to my heart. So first of all, the types of games that you love and that got you into game development are the same. The Mass Effect series is one that I refer to all the time. KOTOR 1 for me, less so 2. Still, at the Old Republic snagged me. I still remember the day where my brother stood behind me for the big twist. Won't spoil it in case you still haven't played KOTOR 1. If you haven't played KOTOR 1, go play KOTOR 1. He was standing behind me when he knew that the big twist was coming, so that he could see my reaction to the big twist in KOTOR 1. Chrono Trigger is one that I mentioned a lot. Those highly reactive, long-form stories where you really get to, in my mind, like explore who you are. I still feel like doing a bad playthrough, an evil playthrough in KOTOR 1 is like part of why I tend to be a good person, because I experienced how shitty it feels to be mean to people.
Oh yeah.
I've heard similar stories from people. The stuff that you have built now with your indie studio is also really inspiring. I think a lot of people will really be inspired by that story and Portrait of a Texas Family. I'm curious, what do you think caused it to blow up? Do you think it was telling a story that was less well told, or do you think it's something else? Do you think it was a freak viral accident? What caused Portrait of a Texas Family to do as well as it did?
Yeah. Also, just letting you know, Willem, and that your mic, I think, may have changed source. It sounds like you're talking out of the mic on your headset, just FYI. But to answer your question about Portrait of Texas Family, I mean, I think we kind of got lucky because that game, for those who aren't familiar with Portrait of a Texas Family, it is a game where you play as the parent of a trans child in Texas, and you are raising her. And you are kind of going around your house and experiencing these different memories of raising her and kind of the ups and downs of being, a parent raising a trans kid in Texas in, what at the time was present day, so 2022.
Hmm.
And, you know, it was a game that our whole team made, in response to, at the time, was pretty monstrous law that the governor of Texas was enacting, where basically he was sending Child Protective Services to investigate parents of trans kids in gender affirming households for child abuse.
Yeah.
And we really kind of wanted to humanize those parents who were being dehumanized and demonized. And also humanize the kids. And there have been so many worse things, unfortunately, that have happened since that whole thing, that I think people kind of forget about that. But at the time, it was really disturbing and upsetting. And my co-writer for the game, this lovely person named Meredith, she
Wait, is it
based
Meredith
in
Fletcher?
Texas. No.
Oh, okay.
She's a voice actor and a writer, and she's based in Houston, Texas.
Okay.
So she was able to bring a lot of the Texas specificity to the script. And at the time, I was not fully out publicly as trans. My egg was still cracking, as they would say. But the game was really meant as a response to kind of, in our own way, humanize people that were being dehumanized. And I think the reason why it ended up blowing up, I think a few months later, was because we got really lucky with this contact at the Houston Chronicle that Meredith knew, who reached out to a few of us to interview us about the game. And after that interview came out, I started getting more interview requests from people from that magazine, from CBS, and eventually I, saw that one of the people that was an inspiration for the game, this incredible woman and mother of a trans child, named Amber Briggle. She had saw the interview I did with them magazine about the game, and she basically, posted about it on Twitter, and we had a wonderful conversation. Because her post about, basically putting together a collection of, I guess for lack of a better word, memorabilia and items that kind of show that you're not abusing your child and that you're actually taking care of your child, to show to Child Protective Services. Her post about that, and kind of telling parents of trans kids in the South, or at least in Texas, to start doing that, kind of went viral. And she was a big inspiration. Her family story, but one of several inspirations for the story of the game. So we had a nice conversation. And then about, I would say, a month later, a few weeks later, she DMs me and says that she talked about the game on MSNBC with her husband. And that was insane. Seeing our little game jam visual novel, being talked about and appearing on MSNBC. That was so surreal. It's still so surreal, and I still can't believe it, to be quite honest.
Yeah, it sounds. I think like the opportunity of having somebody shout you out like that is one thing, and that's not
Yeah.
something that necessarily anybody can just emulate. Any given indie studio doesn't necessarily won't necessarily have that experience. But I think what it definitely sounds like you and your team had was a mission and a purpose and a story that was not only in and of itself interesting and novel. Like if I was viewing this game in a complete vacuum, that just sounds fascinating. And then the fact that it's also incredibly topical and powerful and painful, and the fact that our current political to create a powerful story like that, that not only does your team believe in and
Will, I'm just letting you know I can't hear you.
um,
You're gonna need to repeat that. I'm so sorry.
how far back did you lose me?
Still can't hear you. So sorry. Oh, I heard that.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay. I don't know exactly what's going on. My mic is terrible. How far back did you lose me?
As soon as you talked about it, I heard talking, when you talked about our game being, political. That's the last word I heard
Okay.
before you cut out.
After the word political, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, our political system is so contentious right now, and so to have a story that is incredibly topical, is taking a stance, and is also almost like a public service, I think makes it incredibly powerful on its own. And then to couple that with somebody who feels that vision, feels that mission, and wants to help you out with it, I think it makes a lot of sense that it blew up. It's a story that wasn't being told, and it's a service that you were performing that your team genuinely feels, and that wasn't being performed.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird, right? Because I guess, for Lookout Drive games for my studio, I think the goal is always to make games that we want to play that other studios just aren't making, you know? That was, the goal of Portrait, that was the goal with Bitter Silver, you know? And I think that's going to continue. That's going to continue to be our goal, honestly. We don't want to make games that are just copies or chasing trends. We want to make games that are going to be unique experiences for people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ultimately, when you are openly trans in any type of industry, you're going to have more scrutiny put on you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for making a game like Portrait of a Texas Family, I think, we really wanted to make sure that we got it right while also, making it clear that we're not speaking to every single trans experience in Texas, in the South of the US. Right. We're really just speaking to the story we want to tell. It's a fictional family. It's a fictional story. It's based on, loosely based on the real life experiences of actual families, but we wanted to make sure we treat it respectfully. And I guess the most important thing for us is just have it be emotionally honest, because life is not one emotion or another. It is so many different emotions over the course of a day, a week, a month, a year, so that's something we really wanted to capture. Is, yes, there are moments that are, can be tough when you're raising a trans kid, especially in the South. But there are also moments that can be full of joy.
Yeah.
So I think that was something that we were really important, to remember. And I think also we had a sensitivity reader as well. We talked to other trans, people on the team, um, to make sure we got things right. We wanted to have a character creator. Even though this was a game jam game, I did want to have a character creator that different body types and skin tones and pronouns. So that type of stuff we were really careful about and really wanting to be, mindful of and inclusive of. Even though, once again, this was a game jam game, we only had 30 days to make it. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's always a little bit, it takes some thought to be able to tell a story like this and to be able to tell it in a way that people can, that people feel like you have told the story respectfully. I would love, so if you are open to it, I would love to spend a part of the episode to just explore your experience as a trans game dev.
Sure.
I feel like, from my perspective, I am a mostly straight, white male. So I can't really speak to this, but from my perspective, it feels like game devs are largely quite inclusive and thoughtful, but gamers, not as much. I'm curious how you feel and what your experience has been like as a trans person in games.
Well, how much time do you got?
25 minutes.
There you go. All right, then I'll try to be as brief as possible. I would say the big thing is I genuinely think most people don't give a shit who is making their game.
Mhm.
I think all they want is a game that is compelling, fun, interesting, that speaks to them, that conjures up emotions in them that are meaningful. I think whether you're straight, queer, cis, trans, whatever, I think that's the most important thing you have to think about when making a game. I think the problems of especially being openly trans and openly queer in this industry, whether you're a developer, or a content creator or a fan, is I think because there are definitely more, but there are definitely still not as many openly trans developers in this industry. I think we always have more scrutiny put on us and more of a target on our back. And I think that allows us, when we're making games that are considered quote unquote woke or whatever, because there's a trans character as the lead, because there's a black character as the lead, because there's a gay character as the lead. I think that always opens us up to bad faith actors coming in and hijacking the conversation.
Right.
Because it's always the loudest people who are usually the most hateful and the most bullying, the most easily to make YouTube rage bait videos and things like that to exploit an audience of young men that have been radicalized since Gamergate.
Yeah.
I
mean, since forever. But
since forever, but
Gamergate,
Gamergate was specifically a turning point in the games industry.
Yep.
And then the thing that happened with Sweet Baby last year, unfortunately, and I know personally game developers that were affected by that. That type of stuff, all that stuff, I wish I could say that it exists in a vacuum, but it doesn't. And if you look at our current political system and our current president and our current administration and the way they are cracking down on free speech for college students, you know, um, they're deporting people in just horrific ways. And they are now specifically, and this affects me personally, they are trying to end federal, allowance of transgender affirming care for Medicaid and Obamacare recipients, and which includes me. And that type of stuff all goes back to people not wanting to be curious about other people's experiences, people wanting to scapegoat, and people wanting to demonize and dehumanize people they don't understand, that are making things or living their life in a way they don't understand. And, as a game developer that is openly queer and openly trans, I'm white. I still have a lot of privilege. But, I think for me, it's like my goal is to always be emotionally honest in the games and the stories I'm telling in the games that I make, and B, work with people and market my games to people that are going to take my work in good faith. I don't care about any of these motherfuckers that are starting harassment campaigns that are going on, the dumpster fire that is twitter.com and complaining about Assassin's Creed Shadows or whatever, and they'll find a new target, in 2 months or whatever, because they always do, right? I don't care about those people. They don't matter to me. They don't affect me. I just know they exist. And the fact of the matter is, like, if you are entering the games industry and you are queer and you are trans, you should not let any of these people dissuade you from making games and making art that you care about. Like, there are so many people that are going to love what you make. There are so many people that are going to come up to you or message you privately and talk about the stuff that you made and how much it affected them. And that's happened with Portrait. It's happened not as much because the game's not out yet, but a little bit with Bitter Silver. And that is why we're game developers. And that's why any artist chooses to be an artist, is to connect with people on a human level through art. So, being, openly trans, openly queer in the industry, I mean, it adds more challenges, but I also think it adds more rewards, to be honest. And I wouldn't change a single thing about who I am, how I present myself, what type of games I make. And I think if you're queer or you're trans and you're listening to this and you're worried about online harassment campaigns or whatever, I would say don't let that dissuade you. And then the only other thing I would say is, if you are a member of a bigger team and you're trans and queer, don't be afraid to speak your voice either. Don't be afraid to stick up for yourself and be, not marginalized. Yeah, it's so important to remember your own voice always, because it's so easy for us to be drowned out in a sea of homogeny and I guess safeness when it comes to being queer and trans. And yeah, I mean that's really all. That's all I'm gonna say for now. I could talk about this for hours. So
It's a beautiful perspective. I think it's something that we can all relate to as like artists. If we're doing a really broad word, anybody who creates an art form of any form, if you're a game developer, if you're a writer, if you're a potter, a lot of the reason
yeah,
that we do art is for self-expression,
yeah,
and is telling our unique stories. And I think we are inherently bettered as a society when we get stories, when we get art from many different perspectives. Um, and so, yeah, it's just it sucks when people even need to comment on whether a game is woke or not. If it's not for you, then great, go play something else. And if it
yeah.
is
And
for you,
also, I
then
just want to
awesome.
briefly just say, like, the term woke has lost all meaning from its original intention. You know that it's just a meaningless, like clearly, like just a buzzword that, to be honest, it's usually people on the right just use it as a way to slander people that are making games that just happen to have people in the real world, you know? Like, live a life, go outside, as the kids would say, touch grass, and just like understand that the world is not just all white people, all straight
Mhm.
people, all men. It's a beautiful world we live in. Truly. I really
Mhm.
do. With all the darkness and horrible things happening, you know, I do still believe that this world is worth fighting for.
100%. One of my favorite moments in the past couple of months was going to GDC and the Indie Game Federation Awards. And I don't remember exactly who said it, but somebody said, don't for a second think that you creating your games is not an act of resistance, because it is. Um, I love that as a perspective, you making games is part of how you get your voice out there. And you creating wonderful art about your unique perspective is wonderful for whoever you are. I have one question myself, and then we have two community questions to get to before we end the episode. So you,
Sure.
people who do have a problem with woke, and by the way, I agree, woke doesn't mean anything anymore, and that's, I feel like, the appropriate answer. It's the appropriate way to think about it when somebody uses that term. It's just like, what are you even trying to say? You're not saying anything at this point.
It's a dog
Um,
whistle. It's a
yeah,
dog whistle. That's all it is.
I love it. So, what is the appropriate response? So, if somebody is like, somebody's giving your game shit, if somebody's like, oh, this game is so woke, is the appropriate response to try to teach them? Is the appropriate response to try to placate them? Is the appropriate response to tell them to fuck off? Is the appropriate response to ignore them? Like, how do you respond to that kind of thing?
Well, I'm very thankful that I've never had someone say that to me, to my face, anyway. Um, Maybe it's because our team is still small enough that we haven't had to deal with that type of harassment yet. I can imagine once Bitter Silver comes out and more people start hearing about it, maybe we will, because the lead character of Bitter Silver is a queer Afro-Latina woman. Um, and we have a non-binary bisexual character. You know, so I think honestly, if someone genuinely made that comment and said it like to my face, I would actually ask them like, "What do you mean by that? What do you actually mean by that?" And if they wanted to have a good faith discussion, I would have that discussion with them if it was in person. Now, if it's online, if you're talking shit on the internet, I don't engage with anybody on the internet when it comes to shit like that at all. And I would suggest that none of those people are worth engaging with. Arguing on the internet is a waste of your precious life. Don't do it. Don't worry about it. Worst comes to worst, block them and move on. If it happens in real life and you seem like this person, I don't know, they seem like they want to have a good faith discussion, sure, talk about it. But I think if it's online shit, if it's throwing around, racist shitty dog whistles like woke or whatever. Um, there's a phrase that is also another dog whistle called the trans ideology. Is another one that a lot of transphobes use to talk about how trans people push
Or the
being
trans agenda.
The trans agenda, yeah, which is there is no trans agenda. There's no trans ideology.
It's just people who want to be people.
People that just want to exist and live their life, and not die because the government wants to take away their healthcare, or people are gonna murder them in the streets just for existing openly. But yeah, I would say for online stuff, ignore it because those people are not worth engaging with at all.
Yeah, I
let
think
the people that are good faith
Mhm.
come to you if they have questions. And I think the biggest thing is if you're being emotionally honest in your work, if you are worrying about your audience and the people that you know want to play your game, I think if they have questions, if they have responses, listen to them. Don't listen to the people that are going to, attack you or comment on your game in bad faith.
I think I love that. I think there's a part of me that for a long time when shitty people were shitty, I felt some sense of responsibility to try to teach or help them grow or something. And I think a good number of people feel that way too, or they feel some responsibility to kind of like help heal the chasm or whatever. But ultimately, I think that the prime term to pull out of what you just said is good faith. If somebody is just being a dick and they're putting their foot in the ground, there's no reason to waste your energy on that person. Even in person, if they're there with you in person, ignore them. Tell them to go away. Walk away from them. If, however, they're curious, if they're like, hey, I have had this belief, even if it goes against what you believe, but I'm curious about your perspective, then maybe there's some room for you to actually talk and have a conversation. But even then, it's not necessarily a responsibility. So, you don't owe anybody anything. And I like the answer, ignore them, especially online. All right, we've got two.
Always ignore them. Always
ignore them.
Online.
That makes your life so much better. The minute you start ignoring them. It's so much easier. All right, we've got two questions I want to get to here. So Mark from the audience asks, when approaching a very delicate topic like trans kids in Texas or other intensely personal experiences, what are some ways that you keep it authentic? Context, I've been tinkering with a game about autism, but I worry I'm capturing my experiences that aren't going to resonate.
I would say, Mark, I would say I may have mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I would say as long as you're being emotionally honest about your own experiences, I think that's the most important thing. And I think most people understand that, like, when you're making a game that is personal, you're not speaking for everyone. Mark, you're not going to be speaking for everyone that's autistic. In the same way, we weren't trying to speak to every, family that's raising a trans child in Texas. So I think it's just really, it really just comes down to, especially when crafting a story, not just for a game, but any piece of art, just think about what is genuinely what I want the audience is going to experience this to feel. And how can I keep it as honest as possible without it trending in, one direction or another, too sentimental or too melodramatic. I think sometimes you get a lot of well-intentioned art or well-intentioned games, especially, where I think sometimes they kind of veer into those directions maybe a little bit too much. But I think, I think it's finding that balance that I think allows ultimately an audience to, come away from playing your game feeling satisfied, or at least feeling like it was an experience worth playing. So
That's a great answer. I think that's true for any storytelling. Really, authenticity is pretty easy for the player to kind of smell. So I do think that there's some precedent for saying, if you're trying to push any agenda, it winds up feeling a little inauthentic. And if instead you are just speaking from your heart, what you built in your game is very authentic, is genuinely something that you're worried about feeling, wanted to talk about, wanted to express. And that authenticity, I think, really does ring true to the end product in basically any artistic field. Second question for us before we wrap up is from Major Bacon. Major says, from my knowledge in most sci-fi stories, the humanizing aspect to a whole story ends up always being attached to a specific emotion experienced by the characters. Which emotions would you say that Bitter Silver, and maybe the Lookout Drive team itself, explores the most to reach those humanizing aspects and traits in its stories?
that's a really great question. And I completely agree that I think all the best sci-fi conjures up emotions that I think speak to the current state of the world while being set in a far-flung future, you know. And I think for Bitter Silver, I think one of the things I really wanted to I think the main driving question, I will say, is, and this isn't a spoiler, but it's a theme of the game, and that is, how does someone deal with living a life when death is meaningless? And I think, really, I think one of the main emotions we wanted to tackle through answering that question is anxiety. And then I think another major emotion is, I guess, hope. The anxiety of living a life where you don't know what's going to happen every day because of the nature of who you are. Because in Bitter Silver, you play as a bounty hunter named Lucia Lopez, who's traveling to this backwater planet with her misfit crew to basically track down these 3 bounties to find answers about your missing mother and what happened to her, and hopefully find the answers to this mysterious curse that is affecting you. And where hope comes in is then ultimately like the hope for finding those answers and not giving up. Is by the time you start the game, Lucia and Hobbs and Zap, the 3 main characters. You're playing as Lucia, but Zap and Hobbs are 2 of your crewmates. The 3 of you have traveled for several years, across the galaxy. And there's backstory and things like that will be filled in throughout the game. But really, you've kind of gone on this unseen journey, and now you're kind of at the end of this journey, and Lucia is really kind of hoping that she will finally be able to find these bounties that she's looking for, find these people that she thinks will be the keys to finding her mother and finding the answers to this thing that's been affecting her for so long. And it's, so when I say that the game, I think, wants to conjure up, that feeling of anxiety, that feeling of hope, I think those are the 2 main emotions, but I think also we want the player to also feel like, these characters are a family that also care about each other. and have this camaraderie together where they bicker and they fight, and sometimes they don't always get along, but they do still look out for each other and really care about each other. So, yeah, Major Bacon, I'm just looking at your comment in the chat. Yeah, I mean, this game really is a love letter to Cowboy Bebop, and um, when we started making the game, I couldn't really find any games that kind of captured that spirit of Bebop, that space western spirit.
Mm-hmm.
What's funny now is that since our game and our Kickstarter, Naughty Dog recently announced kind of a space western game called Intergalactic, which I'm very excited to play. I love Naughty Dog's games. I love Uncharted and The Last of Us and Jak and Daxter. And I would love to see more space western games. But I think for us specifically, we wanted to make a story-driven game that very much is talking about, I think, something that's very relatable to a lot of people, and that's how do you make meaning out of your life when it seems like you're kind of just going through the motions, like what actually is your life about? And Cowboy Bebop talked about that a lot, dealing with ennui, dealing with trying to make your way through a galaxy that doesn't care about you, and while also being a fun adventure, right, with great music. So I'm very interested to see what people think about Bitter Silver once they play the full game, because there definitely are some twists and turns that we're excited for people to see. But yeah, I think for me, that central question, was really kind of the guiding star for the story and the themes we wanted to tackle and the emotions we wanted the player to feel. So
that's beautiful. I'm actually, funnily enough, rewatching Cowboy Bebop right now. What a beautiful show! If you haven't seen it, pick it up. All right, we've come to the end of our time here. So before we say goodbye, there's two things we love to do. The first is to assign some homework. So what is something that the audience can do in the next week that'll take them about an hour to practice some of what we talked about here today?
Sure. I mean, I would say, if we want to go off what we talked about, I mean, if you're in the audience and you're someone that's working on a game right now, I would say think about, write out a list of like the emotions you want the player to feel, in your gameplay experience. What are the key core emotions you want them to feel moment to moment, and then overall as a gameplay experience.
Amazing. So write us up a list of the core emotions that you're hoping your players will feel, and you can post that on LinkedIn and tag us. We will be very interested to see what you do with the homework. All right, so then last thing here is to give you some space for anything you'd like to plug, and then any last words of wisdom you'd like to give us, Layla.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I honestly, I don't use social media all that much, to be quite real with you. Just because I have a lot of issues with it, but you can wishlist Bitter Silver on Steam. I posted that in the chat. Wish lists really do help a lot. And we have a demo up on Steam as well. You can check out, a little bit of Bitter Silver, basically the opening prologue. And if you want to follow us on, I think probably the two main social media platforms that we have are Blue Sky and Instagram. So if you want to follow us on Blue Sky, this is the Lookout Drive Games Blue Sky account. I posted that in the chat as well. And yeah, we're also on Instagram. Lookout Drive Games. And yeah, if you like the demo, if it resonated with you, we also have a Discord where you can talk about, your experiences playing, and enjoying the game, and so we have a Discord as well. So yeah, I really do appreciate you being able to chat with me, and thank you so much for having me on. This has been a really lovely conversation, and I just want to say happy Pride. Pride is a rebellion, in my opinion. It's a rebellion in the face of a world that I think is still very much wanting us to not be open and not be free. So I would say if you're queer, if you're trans, gender non-conforming, enjoy not only this month, but enjoy finding your community and surrounding yourself in community. And if you're an ally, keep holding space for all of your LGBTQ plus friends, colleagues. It's dark times right now. It won't be dark times forever. And keep making really cool games and really cool art.
Beautiful. That last one, 110,000%. Keep making beautiful games. Happy Pride Month, everybody. Any links that were mentioned in this episode will be down below, including a link, by the way, to the Unity Game Jam that we are partnering up with Unity on. There's a link to that down below as well, and to the Blue Sky Discord for Bitter Silver and the Steam. That'll all be down below for you to check out. Layla, thank you for being here. This has been a great conversation. Yes, thank you for answering questions and giving us some thoughts.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day.
Have a good day, everybody. Thank you for asking your questions live, y'all, and thank you for being here and listening. And if you are listening to the episode after the fact, we ask, as always, that you send it along to just one other person who may enjoy it too. And we'll see you next week, Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, right here in the Discord. There are links to join down below as well. Goodbye, everybody.